Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Today we're going to start by Maskefler of Yemar Bar Breed Rab Hillel on Tes Aleph. It's a little under halfway down. 9a. I think Hashem that you're able to enter every day. It's less of a learning we should have based in English. Learning also for Shleiman. And it needs Father and for Tully. Okay. Feels like this. Gemara said that a covered Pesach that is slaughtered for a different sacrifice. So if it's on the 14th of Pesach, then it's pasul. On the 14th of Nisan. It's on the 14th of Nisan, then it's pasul. If it's not on the 14th of Nisan, then it's going to be kosher. And we learned this from a pasuk that says, "Ve'im minatzayin karbonei lezevach shlamim laHashem." I learned this before. That if a person will bring a peace offering to Hashem, and it says, if he brings a peace offering from tzayin, Gemara says that we're talking about something that comes from tzayin. Tzayin means flock, and he brings it for a peace offering. What's the animal? What's the sacrifice that comes from flock? It's the Korban Pesach that comes from either a sheep or a goat. That's what flock is. So it's tzayin. So it's going to be a shlamim, which means that it's going to be kosher. So where did we get that a Korban Pesach is going to be kosher as a shlamim? If it's slaughtered with the intention that it should be a shlamim, we got it from the pasuk. Ve'im minatzayin. So comes along Rav Yemar Breid Rab Hillel. How do you know that when it says minatzayin, it's referring to a Korban Pesach that comes from flock, comes from sheep or goats? Maybe it's referring to a asham that wasn't needed. It was like an extra asham, so you brought it for a shlamim, and it's going to be kosher. Maybe that's what it's referring to, not to a Korban Pesach. Why? Because an asham is also brought from flock. It's brought as a ram. Asham is an ayil. Amar Rava says, "Amakra v'im minatzayin karbonei lezevach shlamim davar shaveh b'chol tzayim." No, I need something that's going to be possible to be brought from all types of flock, which is sheep or goats. Like Dr. Stein was saying yesterday, never heard of the Paschal goat, Paschal lamb. But it turns out that it was typical to be brought as a lamb, but it was kosher if it was a goat as well. So when it says "Ve'im minatzayin," it's referring to not just something that's brought as a sheep, but also as a goat. So and that's why it's not referring to the asham, which is only a male sheep. It's also referring to something that's a goat. It's referring to something that's also could be brought as a goat, which is the Paschal sacrifice. Maskefler Rav Avin Bar Chia v'Itema Rav Avin Bar Kahana. So this was Rava that gave the answer. So Rav Avin Bar Chia and Rav Avin Bar Kana, or Rav Avin Bar Kana, they ask Rava, usually in the Gemara, when it says from, min, which is the Hebrew from, or even if it's just the mem, the prefix mem, as a prefix mem on a word means from. That's why the next letter after a mem, after the prefix mem, is going to have a dot in it. Missing nun, it's assimilated into the word with the dot in the next letter. Whatever the case is, that word min is coming to tell me from, which means not all, only from. So usually the word min is an exclusion, not an inclusion. You're telling me ve'im minatzayin means it has to be from all of them. Usually from would mean not all of them. It's only from, not all. It's exactly the opposite. Khan, and over here, min l'rabes. Now it's telling me it means all the types of sign. Amar Ravmani. Ravmani says, Hachanami min lahaitzi. No. You got it wrong. We're not learning from min to tell me that it needs to be from all types of flock, from the sheep and the goat. Min is actually telling me to exclude. What is excluding? That a Korban Pesach can't be 2 years old, can't be in its second year, has to be in its first year. And it can't be a female. Min hatzayin, it's only from, it's not all of them. So how do we know that it has to be something that's both sheep and goats? That's the word hatzayin itself. The word tzayin itself tells that to me. Min, there's actually an exclusion. Okay, so we clarified that point. Maskefler of Chana Bagdasha. Chana of Baghdad asked the following question. How could you say that when the pasuk is talking about the Korban Shlamim and it says what's the pasuk? But if you read further, you see what happened by the Korban Shlamim is it introduced it and then it goes to delineate each possible type. So it says, well, if you bring it from a lamb as a lamb, a sheep, and then there's another passage that says, and if you bring it as a goat. So 1 second, I know already a Korban Pesach could be a sheep or a goat. So obviously this is not talking about a Korban Pesach because I won't have to go through this process. In Kesev, in Maize, this can't be talking about the Korban Pesach. Funny because we know it's not talking about a Korban Pesach, but we're saying that it's talking about a shlamim, but we're learning from it that the Korban Pesach that's brought as a shlamim is valid. But the Gemara is saying, but how could we even be learning this from that a Korban Pesach should be valid from these psukim if it's so clearly not talking about the Korban Pesach? Because it was Korban Pesach, we wouldn't need to go through this. It says actually. Those details that it's going through is teaching me something else. It's taught in a brisa. It says kesev and keves are the same thing. Sometimes the letter flips. There's one letter that read Rashi and Chumash this week. Yarfu tal. Rashi says Rafa. The ayin and the reish flip. Anyway, over here kesev, keves, same thing. So it means the sheep. Keves l'Rabbi says a Pesach la'alya. When it says in Keves, close to Dalet actually, Kesev. Okay, so it's a misprint. Supposed to say Kesev. Okay, so Kesev. When it says in the pasuk the sheep, l'Rabbi says a Pesach is coming to include the Korban Pesach la'alya, that you have to bring the tail also on the altar. The tail doesn't get eaten; it gets put on the altar. Remember that Gemara where there was this non-Jew that said that he faked it and he took ate from the Korban Pesach, and so Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says they knew you weren't Jewish. They didn't give you the fat tail. And the next time he went, he asked for the tail. And they said, "Oh, wait, who told you to ask for the tail?" He said, "Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira." So 1 second, maybe there's something wrong. Maybe you're not Jewish. They figured out he wasn't Jewish. It was a message. It was a secret message from Yehuda ben Beseira to them that to catch the guy. Anyway, it's the tail is supposed to be brought on the altar. It's not supposed to be eaten. That was the trick that he did. So the Rabbi says the Pesach la'alya. It's coming to include that the Korban Pesach you have to bring the fat tail on the altar. Shuaimer im keves. When it says im keves, what is that coming to include? The Rabbi's Pesach she'ibra shenasa is coming to include the Korban Pesach that it's not she'ibra, it's she'avra probably. What's the yud? She'ivra shenasa. It must mean that the year passed, so it's past the year. Ibra sounds like it was a leap year, but it must mean like ivra shenasa. The year passed. So it's over a year old. Shlamim aboy machmas Pesach, and the same thing is a shlamim that comes because of the Korban Pesach. This is a term which is used to describe the chagiga Korban Chagiga, which is brought together with the Korban Pesach. See, the Korban Pesach was supposed to be eaten when you're full, not when you're hungry. So what did you eat? What was the rest of the meal? So you had a Korban Chagiga that you brought. You had other food, the meat from the Korban Chagiga, shlamim, and then for dessert you had the Korban Pesach. So it's coming to tell us that the shlamim haboy machmas Pesach, which is called Chagigas Yudalid, the Chagiga, the 14th L'chol mitzvah shlamim. That Chagiga has all the laws of a shlamim. Sheyitzinu smicha. You have to lean on it and the sachem, and you have to pour the wine. It has the things that come along with it, the wine and the flour. The tinufas chazav v'shaykin. You also have to wave the chest and the thigh, just like you do for a regular shlamim. Shuaimer imeiz, when it says imeiz, it's a hifzik inyan. Now it's dividing, and that's dividing it up to tell us a new concept. Ala'eiz she'ina turnalia, that the goat doesn't have the fat tail. The Gemara says, okay, 1 second. You just told me that from this pasuk of Im Kesev, you're coming to tell me that a Korban Pesach could be brought as a shlamim. We're learning this now from this pasuk. We learned it from Abu Shmuel back on Chesed Beis. We learned it from the other pasuk. That was the whole Gemara we had for the last day. That was telling me that a tzayin could be brought as shlamim. And what's tzayin? Was the Korban Pesach. Now you're telling me you learned it from Im Kesef. And we learn it from here. We even have another source. We have a third source to teach me this. How do you know that a leftover Korban Pesach could be offered as a shlamim? It says you'll slaughter a Korban Pesach to Hashem your God from flock and from cattle. From cattle? It doesn't come from cattle. It comes from, this is a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. This was in, what we had over the summer, the Torah reading in Re'eh. We read this on Shmini Atzeres. We flip it the other way. It's coming to tell me that something that was a Korban Pesach that's not brought as a Korban Pesach could be brought as something that is brought from sheep, from flock, or cattle. Now, which sacrifice could be brought from flock or cattle? Shlamim. To tell me that a Korban Pesach could be brought as a shlamim. So now we have three sources for the same thing. What is it, shlamim? There are three sources for the same halacha. One of them is Librizmani Vibrishnasei. Librizmani means that Pesach has already passed. Now you're stuck with this extra sacrifice that wasn't brought. Vibrishnasei means that it's also reached its birthday already, and it's not a year old anymore. It's 2 years old. It's not in its first year. It's in its second year. It's 1 year old. That's Vibrishnasei. It starts from zero. So it's now 1 year old, which means it's in its second year. One pasuk is coming to tell me not that both are passed, but that Pesach is passed, but it's still eligible to be a Korban Pesach if we would have another Korban Pesach, maybe Pesach Sheni. But because the year is not passed, it's still in its first year. And the one pasuk is coming to tell me that Pesach hasn't passed yet. And it's not even, it's not too old either. It could still be brought. Pesach is coming next week, and you could still bring it. But no, you decided, impatient, you brought it as a Korban Shlamim, and it's going to be valid as a Shlamim, even though it's before Pesach. The Gemara says it's Richi, and it would need to tell me each one of these halachas. If it would only say one, then I would have thought that it's talking about when this is totally not a Korban Pesach. It's not a year old anymore. Pesach already passed. So that would be kosher as a shlamim. But if it's still eligible to be a Korban Pesach, the Chazal Pesach Sheni, because it's still within its first year. So don't bring it as a shlamim, bring it for Pesach Sheni. Emaloi. I would say that it's not kosher as a shlamim, because the Rachmanani Tartif would say 2 psukim. So one would tell me that when it's not eligible at all. One would tell me that when it still is eligible, but because the year hasn't passed. I would say because the Pesach has already passed. But if it's still before Pesach, I could have thought that maybe you can't bring it as a shlamim. The chazi Pesach, you bring it as a shlamim. This was fit to be a carbon Pesach, and it was designated to be a carbon Pesach, and Pesach is still next week, and now you can't go bring it as a shlamim. A Malaya would say that no. So Tzrichi comes to tell me actually that it's kosher as a shlamim, even if it's eligible for a Pesach, and it's still Pesach hasn't arrived yet. Okay. Amar Rav Mishmei the Mabug. This is a new name. If Naftali sees this, they said every Masechta has one name that doesn't exist anywhere else. The name of one of the sages, Mabug. Is there any name similar to it? Is it? Let's see the quote unquote like
G-O-G.
They have a Mabug was apparently a sage who lived in Mabug, Syria. The city referred to in Latin sources as Mabog and called Mabij in modern times. Mambij. That's the read from the note in the Koran. I guess they would call, according to him, they would call people by their by where they're from. Yeah, we do that for last names sometimes. Yerushalmi or Ashkenazi or Hamburger. I go back to the cities. So he said, Rab says the name of my book, Chatas Sheshachta L'Shem Chatas Nachshen Ksheira. Okay, Chatas Nachshen. This whole page is going to be about Chatas Nachshen. Nachshen ben Aminadav was the first of the princes in the desert to bring his sacrifice, the inauguration sacrifice for the tabernacle. He jumped into the water. Now, what's happening now is that in the inauguration sacrifice, in the inauguration ceremony, one of them was on the first day of Nisan was the chatas that Nachshon brought. He brought a sacrifice. Chatas. Now, chatas is usually a sin offering. So, but there was no sin. Well, as an inaugural offering, they brought it, even though there was no sin. Comes along Rav and he says, in the name of Mabog, that if someone slaughters a chatas and he slaughters it, that it should be like chatas nachshon. It's kosher. Why? So he says that like this. The Amar Kra, he quotes a pasuk. Zois teiras achatas. This is the law of the chatas. Teira achas l'chol chatos. There's one law for all the chatos, and if it's kosher, it's kosher. If it's a chatas, then it's if you slaughter it as a chatas, it's not considered that you change the sacrifice. It's still the same sacrifice. It's still a chatas. This would follow Rabba's view that we heard before, that if someone brings a chatas, he's intending it to bring it for a it was designated for because he ate forbidden fat. Instead, he brings it for because he ate blood. We said, well, it's still a chatas, it's still valid. When is a chatas not valid? If you bring it for a different sacrifice, you bring it for an ayla, bring it for a shlamim, then it becomes not valid. But over here, it's still a chatas. It's not a chatas nachshon. I know it's a little different, but still acceptable. Okay, I could have thought that because it's an inaugural sacrifice and it's not coming for a sin, I could have thought it's not really a chatas. It could have considered it. I know you're calling it chatas, but really it's an ayla. really it's like a gift offering. That's what I could have thought. So it comes along. This statement says that no, it's considered a chatas. Yeah, is that acceptable? The Thanksgiving offering is a shlamim. It's a taida. It's not a sin offering. Yosef Rabba Karmallah Hashmaiti. Rabba was sitting and he said over this halacha that Rab said. Esri Masharshia Rabba. So Masharshia asks Rabba. He says, 1 second. Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon argues. He has a unique opinion. He says, I know, I agree with you when it comes to sacrifices, that you have to have the same sacrifice in mind throughout the sacrifice, the way that it was designated. When it comes to carbon mincha, there's several types of mincha. Mincha, the meal offerings. So there's several types, and you don't have to. It doesn't have to be the same one that you have in mind. He explains it very, very clearly. He says, because carbon minchas are very different than animal sacrifice. Let's say, what's the service that you do for a carbon mincha? You stick 3 fingers in, and you take a scoop. It's called a kaimetz, and you offer up that scoop on the altar. Now, let's say you stick your hand in, and you take it out of the machvas, which is a flat pan. Now, the flat pan gets much crispier than, like a pancake, gets crispier than if it's in a deep pan. Deep pan, all the oil sits there. It comes out like a porridge, it comes out different. So if you stick your hand into the machavas and you say, I'm doing this for the intention that it's a deep pan, marcheses, l'shem marcheses, but you can see what it is. So your thoughts are insignificant. So you just look at the facts. What? It's not a potato. It's a you can't, like, just because you have in mind something. We see what it is. It's right here in your face. Or let's say it's a dry one, a dry mincha, and you have intention that it's for a one that has mixed with oil. But you see what it is. So your thoughts are insignificant. But when it comes to a sacrifice, it's totally different, because when you're slaughtering this animal, the shechita that you're doing, if you're thinking that it's supposed to be a shlamim and it's really a chatas, you have no way of seeing that visibly on the animal. So what makes it this? What makes it that? Is all your thoughts. So the thoughts can actually affect it. When it comes to the mincha, there's no such thing. The thoughts are insignificant, because the practical it's right there in your face that it's different. Kabbalah achas l'kulan, same as with receiving the blood. When receiving the blood, it's not visible that it's a shlamim or a chatas or something. Zrika achas l'kulan. Okay, now, when it explains, Taima, what's the reason why a mincha is different than a chatas? The Maseh Mechichan. Because you can see from the mincha that it's not the other type of mincha. You see that it has oil in it. You see that it's a deep pan. You see all of those things you can see. But let's say you weren't able to see, and we would say loy. We would say that it's going to invalidate it. It says amai. Why would it invalidate it? It shouldn't invalidate it anyway, because according to the way Rav said in the name of Mabug, he said that if you slaughter a chatas for the sake of a different chatas, a chatas of nachshon, it says zois toiras chatas. This is law of the chatas. That means that it doesn't matter, as long as it's a chatas, it's going to be valid. We should say the same thing, zois toiras mincha, which is another verse in the Torah that says this is the law of the mincha. It doesn't matter, even if it's a different mincha, it should still be valid. Obviously, he doesn't learn zois toiras mincha. Maybe you could say he doesn't hold the Reb Shimon. Why does he have to hold the Reb Shimon? I think because the sages would definitely agree to this. The sages would for sure agree to this. They hold that even by a carbon mincha, it's not acceptable. Reb Shimon says a carbon mincha, it's acceptable. The sages would say even by the carbon mincha. So for sure they don't hold of zois teras mincha. So if they don't hold of zois teras mincha, they shouldn't hold of zois teras chatas. They shouldn't learn that pasuk, they shouldn't derive from that style verse that it doesn't matter which chatas it is, it's always going to be valid. So the Gemara now says, Ali Yitmar, Ach Yitmar. You have a point. We're going to have to rephrase what we heard from Rav in the name of Mabug. Amar Rav Mishmeid Mabug, Chata Sheshachta Al Manashi Skaper Banachshan, Kshera. If someone shechted a chatas with the intention that nachshan should be atoned, so it's valid. Now we actually learned this before, because the rule is because ein kapar l'mesim, because he doesn't need an atonement. And so when we said like this that you're not allowed to change owners, we learned Rava. It was Rava on a few pages back. Rava said you're only not allowed to change owners if that person is kamaisai, that he needs a kapara. If that person needs a kapara because he also has a sin and he also needs to bring a chatas, then he can't bring it for Shimon if it was designated for Reuben. But if Shimon doesn't even need a kapara, because he only needs to bring an oila, he doesn't need to bring a chatas. Remember, he said if he doesn't need to bring a chatas, so it's not considered that he needed a kapara. So it's not, it wasn't a problem. So here also you bring it for Nachshan, but Nachshan doesn't need a kapara, so it's not considered like you changed owners. Called Shinu Bailam. It's not considered Shinu Bailam. The Gemara says, so why do you have to say Nachshan? Lema Meis Balma. Why do you pick Nachshan? Pick like a random name out of history. It has nothing to do with the Nachshan. Kamash Malan, it's coming to teach us time of the mace. That it has to be only someone that died. But the chai, the nachshan. But if it would be someone that's alive, similar to nachshan. What would it be? Someone alive similar to nachshan. What we're referring to is that nachshan didn't have a sin offering. Didn't have a sin offering because of a sin. He had a sin offering that was brought because of a donation. So if someone else would have a sin offering that's brought because of a donation, for example, a nazir or a mitzaira that also bring a sin offering, but it's not really because of a sin. It's just part of the purification process of the mitzaira, or it's part of the nazir that needs to finish his thing to restart his thing. So he has to bring that chatas.
The Messiah didn't sin. He sinned, right?
Yeah, but it's not, the chatas is not brought as for my lashon hara. Chatas is brought as part of his purification process. That's a good point. And then I think the Gemara says also that the nazir sinned. He shouldn't have taken the vow, right? But it's not brought like So it's psula. It's going to be puzzle. The ma'inio, what are we referring to? Chatas nazir v'chatas mitzayra. This is those other sacrifices which aren't really sins. And the Gemara says, but 1 second. The Gemara now asks, Hani oilas nino. Why are we saying that it's invalid? These are just like oilas. And we said that someone that's mechuyev an oila, that you bring a chatas for, it's not considered shinei bailam. It's not considered that it's for it's not a problem of shinei bailam. The only problem of shinei bailam, changing the owner, was only if that person had a sin as well, and you were bringing the chatas for him. And we learned it from the pasuk that says, yeah, it says
Need this?
says the keeper alav v'loy al chaverei dum yedidei b'mechuyev kapara kamaisai. It's the atonement for him, and we learn from that, and not for his friend. But who's considered his friend? Someone that needs an atonement like him. But someone that doesn't need an atonement like him, that's not a problem. So which means that if the other person needed a chatas that was actually an oila, that would not be a problem. So why are you telling me that if he offers it for someone similar to Nachshan, that's going to be a problem? Well, similar to Nachshan because he was a nazir, maybe a mitzayra. So that's what's problematic. It's not problematic. Rather, we're going to have to adjust a second time what was stated by Amar Rav Mishmeid Mabug. Chatas sheshachta al shemechuyev chatas kenachshan ksheira. Because if someone slaughters a sacrifice for someone that's chayav a chatas like nachshan, it's going to be valid. Because chatas nachshan oilasi, because it's considered a oilan. If you're shini bailim, it's not considered shini bailim. It's not a problem of shini bailim. It's not considered a problem of changing owners because the other person wasn't chayav a chatas. How is this different than the way we said before? Because we said before, because he passed away. Now we're saying, we say, oh, only passed away. That would mean that if he's alive, it would be different. Now we're saying, no. It's not because he passed away. It's just anyone that would have to bring a difference that wasn't chayav v'chatas. Doesn't have to do with passing away. It has to do with that it wasn't. It's not considered shina banim because he doesn't need a kapara even if he's alive. Okay, that's what we gained from this new version. Sorry. Okay, now 1 second. 1 second. The Gemara's gonna. Ikadama, those that say Amar Rav Mishmein de Mabug chatas sheshachta l'shem chatas nachshem psula. A chatas that was slaughtered for the sake of a chatas nachshan is pasal. The chatas nachshan oilahi. This we're talking about now. Instead of offering we're not switching owner. You're not bringing it for nachshan. You're slaughtering it as if it's a chatas nachshan, as if it's that first chatas that was brought, which was not really a chatas. It wasn't brought for a sin. It was brought as an elevation offering. But it was like an elevation offering. It was like a gift offering. The Gemara says, why do you have to jump to chatas nachshan? The same thing should apply if it wasn't a sin. It was a chatas that wasn't for a sin. For example, a chatas of a mitzayra or a chatas of a nazir. Gemara says, well, ikar chatas nakad. We wanted to take the first chatas that existed. That's where that note is probably on. That why do we say nachshan? Because that was the first chatas that was like this, where it wasn't for a sin. That was the first chatas that was brought. Okay, Amar. It's the test. Amar Rava. It says Rav. It's supposed to be Rava. Chatas chaylev sheshachta l'shem chatas dam. This we were quoting a few times. If someone was supposed to bring a sin offering because he ate chaylev, and he has intention for bringing this because he ate blood. L'shem chatas avedis kam, or maybe he's slaughtering it because he worshipped idols, which that's actually a different chatas. That would be a goat as opposed to a sheep. It's ksheira. It's kosher. Why? Probably because chatas, shem chatas is echad, right? Zeis teres chatas. The shem chatas nozel, shem chatas mitzayres psula. But if he brings for one of those other chatas, that those weren't really sin offerings, then it's going to be psulas because hani eilis neno. You call it a chatas because that's the way it's offered. But the fact is that it's not coming for a sin. It has a different category. Boy, Rav has a question. Chatas chaylev sheshach l'shem chatas. There is another type of chatas. You're going to be at the end of this Masechta. You'll be so know all of these different types of chatas. There's this one, that one. You're gonna read chitas when it comes to Vayikra, totally different. It's gonna slow you down. So
we see.
Yeah, you see it.
May we see it?
Oh, may we see it. So the chatas of someone that contaminates the temple is at that sliding scale. It depends on how wealthy he is. It's called the carbon oila v'yoret. It goes up and it goes down depending on his tax bracket. Either going to bring an animal, or he's going to bring a bird, or sliding scale.
It gets better. It's finest maravis. It's more.
Oh yeah. So Rava has a question like this: one chatas that's brought for the sake of another sin whether even if it's avodah zarah, you said, well, it's still a chatas, so it's still valid. So you didn't change sacrifices. It's a different sin, but you didn't change sacrifices. It's still acceptable. But let's say you bring it as a chatas for Tumas Mikdash Kedushav, which is not exactly the same type of chatas, because this is an oil of the Yored. This is a type of chatas which is on a sliding scale. Is that considered the same type of sacrifice? Do we say, well, the sin is similar? It's both kares, excision. Or maybe we say, no, it's a different sacrifice. Because this is always an animal sacrifice. But this depends on his tax bracket, right? Could be he has to bring a bird, an animal, could be a bird, could be a meal offering. Okay, that's his question. Rav Acha Brei Rava Masni Kula L'Psula. Rav Acha Brei Rava said he learned the Gemara totally different. He says that Rava says that if you bring a chatas for the sake of a chelev, for the sake of dam, it's possible. Bring it for avodah zarah, it's possible. My timer, he says, the chatas, you have to slaughter it as a chatas. L'shem oisa chatas, it has to be for that sin. It's exactly the opposite. Rav Acha, Rava's son, he taught what Rava said, the opposite of the way we just learned it. Rav Ashi asks a question for him. He says, 1 second. I don't get the way you're learning it. Boy, Rava had a question. How do you learn Rava's question? How do you learn Rava's question? Rava's question is, if I slaughter a chatas for the sake of a chatas chelev, for the sake of dam, it's kosher. For the sake of avodah, it's kosher. But what is it going to be if it's for the sake of contaminating the temple? That's an oil of Yored. Should it be kosher? Should it be pasul? According to you, Rav Acha Brei Rava, how do you even ask the question? If you slaughter chelev for dam, it's pasul. If you slaughter chelev for avodah, it's pasul. What's going to be if it's oil of Yored? Of course, it's pasul. And you agree, Rava had a question. So how do you learn the whole thing? The whole premise of the question just gets lost. The way Rav Acha Brei Rava learns the statement. So what's his question? Amalei. No, you see, it can't because of the conversation. Here, Hillel was suggesting that maybe one is Rabba and one is Rava, which is common that it's confused. But you see from the conversation that he's accepting this as a question. So it has to be the same, right? Oh, you were saying because it said Rav before? No.
When you said it adjusted and then later on it went back to Rav.
No, because it adjusted it to Rava.
Oh, okay.
So Rav Acha Brei Rava responds, Amalei, Anan b'shili bainim baila masnina la. I have a totally different version. I have to. He says, I got to explain this to you. You got it wrong. I'm learning that not that we're changing sacrifices, we're changing owners. Take a look at it. This is the way it was stated. Amar Rava. Rava says, Chatas chelev sheshachta al mi shemechayev chatas dam. If someone slaughtered a chatas chelev, and he slaughtered it on behalf, not of Reuven, on behalf of Shimon. Shimon happened not to eat chelev. Shimon ate dam. Or Shimon worshipped idols. That's psula. Because that's called Shin Bailam. It has to be for the same owner, and it can't be for a different owner that's committed a sin. But if the different owner did not commit a sin, then it's not kamaisai, right? Only him and not his friend that's similar to him. But if the friend didn't sin and you slaughtered, so it's not considered change of owner because he didn't sin. So if it would be a nazir or mitzayra, that's not a sin offering. And the question would be as follows: Rav has a question. If someone slaughtered a chatas for someone that contaminated the temple, is that considered kamaisa? Is that considered like it's the same sin? Why? Because both of them are kares. We say yes, that's a sin, so therefore it's invalid. Or maybe we say that I know it's a sin, but it's not the same animal. It's not the same type of sacrifice. This is a sliding scale sacrifice. It's not kamaisai. It's not a real chatas. Gemara says Teiko. Okay, so he gave quite a good answer to this to the disproof for him. The Gemara leaves it the question as a Teiko. We can start the next Gemara, but we're not going to get through it, and we're going to have to stop in the middle. Let's leave it over here. Let's leave it over here. Yeah, let's leave it over here. The next Gemara is like you got to learn together. It's like one piece. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Good